The title for today's talk is The Fear Factor. For the month of May, we're looking at our emotional lives and how we can find some wonder and joy in that aspect of our lives. Last week, I introduced the principle of the month that we are working with as far as our exploration of emotions go. It's from the Declaration of Principles, written by our founder, Ernest Holmes. And it reads, "We believe the ultimate goal of life to be a complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all." This is the core principle that I'm basing my talks on this month. Freedom from discord. I think that fear is probably the emotion that keeps us from being free from all discord of every nature. Fear can keep us stagnant. It keeps us from growing. Fear can keep us playing small and never reaching our true potential. Fear can be sudden or unexpected, or a lifelong companion. We often only look at the negative side of fear, but there's a place in our lives for healthy fear too. Healthy fear can keep us out of dangerous situations. Healthy fear can be a warning signal, that gut feeling or that intuitive voice that stops us from entering into a situation that can be potentially harmful. But it truly is fear that is behind all of the discord of every nature that we experience in life. And so to overcome that discord, to achieve that freedom from all discord of every nature, as it says in our principle, we have to begin to look at our fear and look at what's behind it. Fear tends to draw out the worst in us. Somehow, every insecurity that we didn't even know we had shows up when fear is present. When fear is up inside of us, we often assign meanings to the things that are based on our own insecurities. And we can talk ourselves into believing that these things are true because we are so fearful and so doubtful in that situation. We can become anxious and upset because these other fears are happening. And then the fears continue to mount. And sometimes it's like making a mountain out of a molehill, just as they often say. The fear just perpetuates itself and becomes a greater thing as we stay in the fear. The three most common responses to feeling afraid are to fight, to flight, or to freeze. So to fight, to run away from something, or to be so paralyzed by it that we cannot respond. These responses often make things worse because we try to protect ourselves based on feeling this fear. We tense ourselves up and we tighten, and things get worse very quickly. In fact, we often usually hold our breath when we are in the fear mode, and it causes us to stiffen up our muscles. We can talk ourselves onto a ledge with these mounting fears with no place to turn. And no good can come out of this situation, and escape seems impossible unless we turn our attention towards where we want to go. Fear is our reaction to perceived threat of hurt or harm, whether it's real or imagined. It's what we are internalizing within ourselves. Our response to whatever that situation is what is triggering our fear. In the New Thought Dictionary, Ernest Holmes defines fear as faith negatively applied. He goes on to say in Can We Talk to God? Fear is a positive acceptance that you shall experience that which you dislike. Faith is a positive acceptance that you shall experience that which you do like. But they are identical in this mental action. The only difference is the direction. Fear and faith have the same energy behind them. But fear overtakes our faith when our belief in the fear of something we don't want to happen is going to happen is greater than the faith we have in it not happening. When our fear becomes greater than our faith, then that's when the fear builds within us. Some argue that faith and fear are entirely different attitudes, opposite ends of the spectrum. But really, fear is nothing more than misplaced faith. It's having more faith in the power of something bad happening than in the faith in the power of something good happening. But with all that being said, when we are smack dab right in the middle of a fearful experience, it's very hard to find enough faith to bring about a positive outcome. This is why it's so very important that we do our spiritual work on a daily basis, that we keep up our practices. It's important that we keep ourselves steeped in the principles that we know to be true, in these fundamental beliefs that are the cornerstone of our philosophy. It's very important that we continue to reach out and find those practices or those people that will help us have a deeper understanding of these principles, to actually have an actual embodied experience of the principle operating in our lives. The more often that we practice and internalize these high and holy truths, the easier it is to step away from the fear when we find ourselves in the midst of it. You know, one of the things I love about this philosophy is that it is so steeped in science. It's in the things that we talk about that have been proven scientifically. We originally were called religious science because we had scientific principles that we applied in a very systematic and practiced way to bring about change in our lives. And these practices that we engage in have been studied for their effectiveness in making actual physical, biological changes in our bodies. Now, I was recently reading an article about how fear changes our brains and how when we face our fears, we can actually heal our brains and our bodies and our lives. By beginning to face our fears, we actually start to rewire our brains, creating new neural pathways that lead to a more positive solutions for the situations that we face. When fear was at one time our go-to response, this remapping of our neural pathways allows us to find other, more proactive responses to difficult situations. The part of our brain that controls our fears is the amygdala. And when we are able to face our fears, to meet the situation head on, and survive the situation, we begin to slowly teach our amygdala that we don't have to let the fear and anxiety be our go-to response. You know, this reminds me of the time spent with my niece and nephews. I've never been a mother, but I have participated in the mothering of these wonderful people that I'm so blessed to have in my life. And I've been blessed to be a part of their lives as they were growing up. And one of the things that frequently happens to children is that they become afraid of things that they can't see, that are in their rooms, things under their bed or in the closet. And oftentimes these fears show up as when they lay down to go to sleep at night, because they're turning out the light and there's this unknown thing out there. And so what I learned when I was with my niece and nephews was to explore these things that were frightening the children. Sometimes this meant I got down on my hands and knees with them and I lifted up the blankets and I looked under the edge of the bed just to prove that there was nothing under there, nothing going on at all. Sometimes it was opening up the closet door and turning on the light to show them that there was nothing in there to be afraid of either. This gentle and gradual reassurance that there is nothing to be afraid of trained them not to be in fear of those things. They quickly got over this idea that something was under the bed going to get them. You know, in the same way, we can train our brains gradually and gently and kindly and lovingly to not be afraid of those anticipated, yet seldom real, fears. But when we would rather avoid them, when we're afraid to look under the bed or open the closet door, we're training our brains to be afraid. And so, as always with everything in life, we have a choice. And the choice is based on this question: am I more attached to staying comfortable with my fear, or am I more invested in releasing it and taking actions by pulling back the curtain to see what's behind it? What am I more attached to? Do I really prefer to stay in this thing that I'm familiar with, in this fear, because I know what it is? Or would I rather release it? The question then becomes, what would I rather strengthen? Would I rather strengthen my fear in the unknown, or my faith in what is real and true and will actually lead me to freedom? Fear most often involves taking risks. Some people have more or less of a risk appetite than others. And the same holds true for fear. Some people may be more risk adverse when fear is present, and other people may have a more daring and prone to take risks despite having fear. There really is no right or wrong answer because each of us has to deal with this with our own comfort levels in our life. It may be beneficial for those of us who are skeptical about taking risks due to fear to face those fears and push past their comfort zone to stretch and grow. And it may be more beneficial for those of us who are used to taking risks and appear fearless to slow down and reflect and pay attention to those hidden areas of opportunity. One of my most favorite sayings in life is transformation doesn't happen in the comfort zone. So am I willing to risk not being comfortable to move past something that is somewhat debilitating in my life? What am I willing to do here? And it's no matter which end of the spectrum we find ourselves on, or if we're somewhere right in the middle, fear usually requires being vulnerable, taking an honest look underneath of the situation, and then telling the truth to ourselves. We cannot lie to ourselves. We can, but eventually we catch up with it and we realize that it didn't serve any purpose. Facing it head on, facing the truth of the situation, I found to be the best way forward. This exercise in vulnerability when exploring this fear factor is half the battle, and it sets us on the pathway to freedom. And our spiritual practices can support us along the journey, no matter what the cause of our fear is. I found in my life that being afraid of one thing often leads to fear of another thing. There's a cumulative effect that's happening, in my life at least, as I allow myself to become more and more afraid. I remember when I was in practitioner training somewhere 2006, 2007, and I was in a practitioner session that we had required sessions that we had to do. And during the course of the conversation with the practitioner, she said to me, "Well, it sounds like you're afraid." And I looked at her, and in all sincerity, all honesty, and totally true, I said to her, "I'm not afraid of anything." And she gently laughed. You see, I didn't label things that I was avoiding as fear. These were just things I didn't particularly like to do. For instance, I didn't like to talk on the telephone, but I certainly wasn't afraid of it. I didn't like to be on anything that didn't have a bottom to it. So, for instance, I did not like to cross bridges, and I did not like driving over them. I've actually pulled over on the side of the road to avoid driving on bridges and let somebody else drive. And how many of you can remember the MGM Grand with the glass floor that it had above the lion's pit? Right there in the middle of the casino, you could walk across this glass floor and see these amazing lions in an artificial habitat beneath this floor. Yeah, I couldn't walk on that. I could walk around the whole edge of it, but there was absolutely no way I was stepping out on it. And I remember when the glass walkway was built at the west end of the Grand Canyon, and they advertised that, and just looking at those pictures would make me break out in a sweat. But I never ever would have said I was afraid of it. I just didn't care for it. So as part of my homework for that session with the practitioner, I was instructed to go home and make a list of the things I didn't like, the things I avoided, the things that made me uneasy. In other words, I was told to go home and write a list of my fears. The practitioner suggested I come up with 100. I came up with 64 things and found that quite shocking. I didn't want to name any of these things as fear, but they were certainly behaviors that had created strong neural pathways in my brain. And as I avoided them or found ways to step around them, that became the stronger response. The avoidance became the response I went to. And that became the way I reacted to things, and it was other things, and it was easy to transfer that feeling to new situations in my life that felt the least bit uncomfortable. Truly, I think if I had not found this philosophy and learned these principles and practices, my list of 64 fears would be a great deal larger today. I still have things I'm working on, but I have learned that if I deal with it now, rather than applying some avoidance behavior, the situation resolves itself more easily. My faith in what I have found to be true, my faith in that I will have a transformative experience through my spiritual practices, my faith in a universal love intelligence that is always unfolding for my highest and greatest good is now stronger than my fear of anything. and it is stronger than my desire to avoid it. You know, things come up in our lives all the time, and every single moment we're given an opportunity to face the fear and do it anyway. We don't always know what the outcome will be. We may find that something beyond that fear is more frightening than that initial thing. It's hard to know what will be the next experience. But this I do know. This I have proven in my own experience. This I have seen happen in the lives of others who are willing to take the leap. Facing the fear leads to true, unbridled freedom. It lies on the other side of fear. We will never be free from discord of every nature if we are afraid to step beyond our fears. When we can't move beyond our fears, the only thing left for us is more fear. And so if you're having difficulty moving beyond the fear, we have some amazing resources available to you. We have our spiritual practices of prayer and meditation, of journaling and contemplation. These tools will help you have a greater understanding of exactly what it is you're afraid of, where it came from, and how it's showing up in your lives. These tools will help you work through it so that you can step to the other side and move beyond what is limiting you. And when you're having trouble finding what it is for you on your own, we have amazing people here who can help you find that. Turn to our practitioners. Turn to our ministry of prayer. They're here and ready to help you. Their gift, they've been trained in doing this, is to find the hidden belief, to uncover the fear, and to find the spiritual principle to anchor your faith. And then they are honored and delighted to know the truth for you. You can reach out to our practitioners individually to schedule a one-on-one session. You can reach out to our ministry of prayer. The link to it is on our website, and all you need to do is briefly describe your situation in the prayer request, and our ministry of prayer will be delighted to do a spiritual mind treatment for you as part of our daily spiritual practice. And so speaking of prayer, let's take these ideas now into our form of prayer. We call it affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment, where we center ourselves in that universal love intelligence, that consciousness that knows all, that is all-encompassing, that is eternal and everlasting. And we know the truth of the situation through affirmative statements. Then we express gratitude and let it go. Let it go to the action and the activity of the divine. And so, if you would with me, take a moment now and turn within. And so I know that right here and right now, there is only one. One power, one presence. One eternal, creative love intelligence that has brought forth everything into existence. In the beginning was nothing but it. And through its own energy, through its own essence, through its own will, this creative intelligence brought forth everything into expression. Everything that is right now, everything that has ever been, and everything that is yet to be is all a perfect and unique manifestation of that one. And each creation is filled with the very essence of that love intelligence. It is filled with peace, with harmony, with wisdom. It is showing up abundantly throughout everything. There is this eternal power and presence that is moving itself into expression throughout all life. And I know that I am one with it. I know that the power that created me resides within me, is at the very heart of my being. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for all creation. For there was nothing for this intelligence to create from but itself. Therefore, each of its creations must be a unique representation of itself, filled with all of those qualities of abundance and peace and love and harmony. There could be no other way. And so in complete realization of this power and presence manifesting itself throughout all life, I speak my word. I know that right here and right now, that this divine flow of loving intelligence is moving itself into expression throughout each one of us, throughout every moment of our daily lives, throughout everything that we think and do. it is actually manifesting itself. And there is a sense of trust and faith and hope embodied within all of this. And that when I turn to that presence and allow it to fill my very being, there is no space in my life for fear. And any fear that existed there before quickly dissipates through this knowledge, for this embodied feeling, through this experience of my connection with the divine. I know this is happening in me, and I know it is happening in all life. That when I simply turn within and tap into it, it readily and eagerly responds. When I take one step towards Spirit, Spirit takes 1,000 steps in return towards me. It fills my life. It lives through me. It dissipates all fear and anxiety. And it centers me in its loving intelligence. And oh, how good that feels. And I just give great thanks for this knowing. Great thanks for this experience, and great thanks for seeing it showing up through everyone I meet. And so I release this word into the law, into that creative, loving intelligence that always says yes, that has no limits, no boundaries. It simply responds in the affirmative. I let it go and I let it be. And so it is. Amen.